the rest of life outside of Web3, it's like that's hugely important for me because, just like figuring out how to make a living as a self-employed creative person is a lot of work and like often very stressful work. So like it's been really important that this project be kind of like where I go to recharge in a way and not to have those like really heavy like, oh, this has to sell out, or like, with releasing music, like, oh, this has to get this many plays or whatever.
I'm not sure if NFTs are going to be the solution to a lot of problems that the world has, but I think they're at least getting us thinking in new mindsets that maybe we weren't considering before.
Hey everyone, and welcome yet to another episode of NewForum. NewForum is powered by NewCoin Foundation and is focused on fostering decentralized social applications, also known as Social 3.0, by forming an ecosystem and a community of visionaries, creators, and investors to spark conversations on the topics of crypto and Web3 culture.
We're honored to have Chris Martz and Patrick Phelps-McKeown with us today. Chris is a digital Web3 artist, creative director, and designer who has been working in Web3 for companies like Uniswap. Patrick is an artist, musician, and designer who is part of the Iterator project. We're going to talk with Chris and Patrick about their experience in Web 3.0, and we can't wait to hear more about the Iterator project. Hey, Chris and Patrick, we're super honored to have you on this episode of NewForum.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Perfect. So how has your experience been so far? And what's your background? I guess maybe we can start with Chris or Patrick, like you decide. Either way works.
You go for it.
Mine's a little bit longer, but I'll try to make it a bit concise. I've said it recently. My experience with Web3 goes back a while. Like I first kind of got involved in crypto and Web3 in 2014, starting to work on some very early crypto projects, sort of like pre-decentralized exchanges, back when kind of like Ethereum and Ripple were like the biggest coins, and Bitcoin, of course. And then I've sort of had two phases. I had an early phase, which was sort of around just collecting and holding coins. And then I would say my like real Web3 experience started at the launch of FWB. And that was kind of being very early in that community, sort of influenced and opened a lot of doors for me to work at companies like Uniswap, but also Gitcoin and now Rabbit Hole, Prism, a few others. So yeah, I would say FWB is kind of the sort of like launching point for me into whatever this world is. But yeah, Patrick, what's maybe yours?
Yeah, my background in general is more in visual arts and music, performing arts. I'm very new to the world of Web3. I think it was almost exactly a year ago, Chris, that we were like kind of having some of the first conversations that led to Iterator. So I think a lot of my experience has been through this project, and having friends in my local community who are starting to get interested in the same kind of things and applications like crowdfunding, various tools for artists. And also I think it's important and funny to note that me and Chris went to high school together and middle school. So we've been working on various projects for like 20 years at this point. So the Web3 chapter of it is a very recent one, but as far as like creative collaboration, there's a pretty extensive history of that.
That's amazing. I think it's cool to hear from you guys your background, and I'm curious also about the friends with benefits part, because it's been, I think, a very popular. Is it a DAO? I'm not quite sure. Is it a DAO? Yeah, right. So I'm wondering how in general, Chris and Patrick, was your experience from going from maybe Web 2 creative economy to Web 3? Like, what are some initial changes that you could point out that benefited you both?
Yeah, for me, the transition from Web 2 to Web 3, it's still happening. I would say that like a lot of my work still comes from brands in the advertising world. And then a lot of that is kind of companies that are either directly in Web3 or starting to embrace that sort of stuff. So yeah, I would say that it's been interesting. It's been very exciting and kind of like rewarding that sort of the professional interactions I've had have been very friendly, very open, very transparent in a way that a lot of Web 2 companies and corporations that I've worked for haven't been, especially around payment, around team structure. You mentioned DAOs, like just the full transparency there. So yeah, that's kind of been my experience. It's been a pretty positive one.
Yeah, as far as the transition, I would say I'm still pretty firmly in Web 2 as far as my creative practice. Just as, you know, with putting out music, I'm very reliant on platforms like Instagram, Spotify, Bandcamp, those sorts of things. So kind of where I'm at right now is looking at ways that kind of these new technologies and their applications can like cut out middlemen in the process, basically, or kind of like re-empower artists to have direct relationships with their fans and their communities, and, you know, a means of earning a living that's not dependent on, you know, what a corporation that's beholden to shareholders and venture capital, like what they want to do. So kind of, you know, how we've built our project is kind of, in some ways, I don't know, you may agree or disagree with this, Chris, but I feel like it's sort of like a utopian vision of like what creative self-employment could look like, that I think for me at least is like both informed by things that I've done in the past that I've really enjoyed, like ways that I like to work, and also kind of like the downsides of like the Web 2 ecosystem and kind of platforms controlling the connection between artists and communities.
Cool. So you two you went to school together and you're still working together. I mean, that's really cool. Do you find that like, does that make I guess the collaboration like any more exciting? You know, just like knowing each other from way back. And also it would be really nice to hear what the Iterator project is about. I think I'm pretty curious to hear about it. So maybe if you can talk about like how the collaboration looks like for both of you, and then maybe touch on the project, that would be great.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like in response to sort of knowing each other since middle school. The other third member that is a developer also has we've also known for that long, and I think there's a shared level of trust and understanding you have both creatively and personally that is really nice. And I've encountered that with new people I've met, but it's I would say like the collaboration has kind of evolved over time, similar to how our project has evolved. In that, yeah, it's like when I lived in North Carolina, Patrick and I were doing sort of like physical like art collectives, and then I would say that like the projects here are starting to maybe manifest like digital art collectives or digital groups of people that come together and work together. I'm gonna let Patrick try to describe Iterator because I think he's better at it. But for me, Iterator is sort of it's a Creative Commons open license project. So it's a series of like 400 pieces of art that were all made in Figma, which is a free design tool. And it is those pieces of art, but I think part of it is also the sort of the community around it and trying to bring people in and make them co-owners of that. So like the first iteration or the first sort of release was us kind of allowing people to mint these NFTs, but then that NFT becomes sort of their pass into our ecosystem, and then also makes them ideally, if they want to, makes them a contributor and an active artist as well, in ways that are kind of to be determined that we want to encourage. But,
Yeah, and kind of to piggyback off that, like, I feel like the to be determined is kind of like a core value of the project in a way. So going back to how, the fact that we've known each other for a long time and worked together for a long time, how that kind of influences the collaboration. I mean, Chris, you mentioned like the trust, which is huge. I feel like there's a lot less friction in group projects when, everyone knows each other on a deep level and can just trust that like you're doing what you're best at, you're doing what you're best at, and we're all going to like fit together and create something that, each of us individually could not do, but all together, kind of forms this like Voltron. And, kind of the way that's manifested in this project is there's been a lot of like the design process has been very tag team. And when we start looking at like the images, you can kind of see the like different phases. But we started talking about this, I think, in fall 2021. And at that point, Chris had made some kind of early prototypes and mock-ups of this sort of symbol language. There were like some themes. And I feel like one of the strengths of our creative collaborative relationship is that like we've worked together for long enough that we can kind of just pick up where the other person is going. Like there hasn't been a lot of like, okay, let's talk exactly about what the aesthetic is and we want this to look like this. It's just sort of like, oh, I see what you did and now I'm going to take it and run with it. And that's kind of how it started. Yeah, so these are some of the visuals from various stages of the project. So you can kind of see on the left-hand side here, these were some of the first things that Chris showed me. And there, we had some conversations about themes and ideas and motifs on a more zoomed out scale. But a lot of it was really just like creating the images and the aesthetic and then responding to that and really letting the project be about the process. And, I would design some stuff based on this, pass those over. We explored a lot of different potential avenues for like treatments. So, and you can see if you're looking at the actual work from Iterator 1.0, right? So the first drop that came out last month, it's this very like stroke, almost like neon kind of aesthetic. We've even talked about maybe like commissioning a neon artist to make physical iterators. But, we had a bunch of different, like, maybe we want it to look more like paper cuts, or maybe we want to incorporate like an element of photography. I mean, there's that orange one where, Chris, you'd gone in kind of like a pixel art direction with it. So yeah, a lot of the project just came out of this like creative play and a lot of time spent like both drawing in Figma at the same time and sort of seeing like, oh, I really like that one shape you made, but like, what if we, rounded this corner or something? So yeah, I mean, as far as like the question that I'm tiptoeing around, which is like, what is Iterator? I would say that it's basically like an emergent design language. We didn't necessarily set out to create a design language. It was just kind of like, these are some exercises, these are some sketches in a direction that I'm interested in. And we sort of found the overlap of like, oh, I think this is cool too. What if we pushed it in this direction? So you can kind of see, Chris, if you want to go back to the like random number generator part on the right a little bit. I'm kind of jumping around.
Yeah, no. Sorry, I'm kind of floating over here.
Yeah. So like one kind of tangential direction that we ended up not going very far down, but at one point we were like, well, we've created, this vocabulary of shapes, and what if the compositions were created procedurally? And I'm not much of a programmer. I'm trying to like teach myself P5.js in my free time, but for this we literally just like rolled a die for each kind of square of this grid, and that would determine what shape goes in that, what size it is. And,
Yeah.
like I said, we ended up not going with that approach in general, but it's kind of been like, it's sort of growing like a mushroom or like a slime mold. Like it just sort of like goes in a direction for a while. And then if it's something that we're interested in, it like keeps going towards that. So kind of what you see now as the final product is like, it's almost like watching like the instep of an evolutionary process. Like it could have been so many different things if we had like steered it in one way or another at a different point, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's good. I only wanted to add that to kind of reinforce that, yes, that's pretty much how the process went down, and to reinforce that this is not generative art. It looks almost generative, but it's actually illustrations, and individual sort of like art pieces. Every single composition is made by hand. So that's something that like we made a conscious decision to do around here when we started doing the generative experiments, mostly because we were kind of unhappy with the output, and just were like, well, why not let's just like figure out what we aesthetically want and commit to it. And that's something that I really haven't done in a while with any of my pieces, is really just go full on like, okay, like we think that this looks good, let's try to make as many of these as possible. And yeah, this was sort of the turning point, was like, oh, let's play with some generative randomness, but at the same time, this is something we want to come back to in 1.1 and in future versions, because we know it's possible and we know it can produce things as complex as this. We just, at the moment, we're like, actually the best thing we can do is to make as many of these as possible, and that's going to teach us the most about the tool, about kind of the practice of whatever this new practice is. So yeah, I just wanted to add that. And that sort of segues into like, here's an early using sort of the like randomization. Here's an early mock-up of what the website could be. Here we were talking about doing 333 of them. There's, I mean, you can see sort of like stuff that is carried over into the project. But what really I think was like a second push for us was our community. So we have a Discord and a Twitter that are pretty, they're not amazingly active, but the people that are active are very creative and really fun. And so we have this one, like people from our community will kind of take the elements from our community file, which is up on Figma right now, which I can link to. And so you can kind of use this community file and take any piece of it, recolor it, recompose it. And so right now we have a contest running where people are just doing that. And some of them are using their projects and their NFTs. So this is Bloomers, another project that we really like, bloomers.life, and just other designers kind of jumping in and just trying stuff. And that was really the goal. And just seeing that happen has been really motivating as much as like the project itself. It's been really, really incredible to see. And so we want to encourage more of that. And we also want to incentivize that in the future, so that like, I mean, this contest, they will get an NFT based on the one that is chosen. But in the future, we'd love it if they could also sell these NFTs possibly through our DAO or through some sort of treasury as well. So we're trying to close that loop there eventually as well. But as Patrick said, yeah, like I think to kind of describe it, I guess for me, I think of it as like open sourcing an art practice or open sourcing a design language. You said something similar to that, which is I don't know, it's kind of the same thing, but like I feel like when it comes to illustration and visuals, there's not as much to pull from as say code. Like I think code is very, very out there and available on GitHub, and open source is a common thing. But I feel like design and art are a little more gate kept. And so we want people to like, basically when these are close to done minting, we want them to have access to all 420 of them and be able to go in and do whatever they want with them. And the open license means they can sell that, and we encourage them to sell it, similar to say Nouns or other DAOs like that. So I'm going to stop sharing unless Patrick, you think I should zoom in on anything else, but I think we're good here, and I can give you.
I feel like we touched on a lot of the big stuff.
I really like the kind of method you came up with, you know, that you are kind of already using the Web3 kind of like DAO collaboration model, that you are, you know, we always ask ourselves, okay, how is it going to look like for people working together? And it's like you made it so simple in a Figma. But you know, I see Figmas every day, but it's more like nodes or, you know, project planning, but it's not really like art. So I think it was really cool to see how we can go from like one design and then you go to the next, and then you might scrap an idea, but then somebody else jumps in. And I think that's maybe what the future of Web3 collaboration, metaverse, whatever, gonna look like. We're not there yet, but I think it's a really, like you said, a kind of like growing design language or immersive kind of world. So I think that's pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, I guess I will add that the designs are like fabulous. Like I love the colors. I love how intricate and how complicated and how beautiful and how pleasant. Like it's just like gave me like a mixture of feelings, but overall very positive. And I also like that it's like open source, right? And I mean, when you were sharing all of that, I was like, wow, how many people would share like their process, you know? And you're like giving it all out, but I think this is one of the things I love about Web3, right? Like we just like sharing and helping each other and supporting each other. And like Joyce said, this idea of collaboration and, you know, allowing people to be a part of it. And I really like the projects that you're working around this and having your community like collaborate, be a part of it. And I think it's really great that, and I think one of those amazing things about Web3 is like your community members or people who support your work get to be a part of it, right? So they get to benefit as well, versus like when you think about the current, I guess some of the current Web2 platforms were so one directional, and you just put stuff and you barely even know who is following you, and they barely know what you're doing. And this is really great that, you know, you have your own community and your and it's like the beginning of a DAO, right? I'm not sure if you guys have your DAO yet, but this is like the perfect start of, I think, a successful DAO. And it looks like you guys are like, you know, well on your way to achieving that. So overall, I think when I was looking at it, I kept thinking like, maybe you answered that and I missed it, but I was wondering like, what inspired it? Like, you know, because usually people might create something because like one guy said he got into Web3 because he wanted to support, or he started this project because he wanted to support a friend an artist who needed like financial support, and somehow he ended up going down the rabbit hole. So what was it for you guys? Like, how did it all begin?
Yeah, this is interesting because I can't pinpoint it exactly, but there were a series of conversations that Patrick and I were having, and the other contributor, kind of around value transfer and around work. And Patrick's like a very good musician and very active in the sort of like both the like Southeast and in like the like world scene of music, of electronic music. And so that was sort of us kind of like being open with each other and talking about like how much should art cost, how much should music cost, how can we better like direct transfer that value. A lot of those conversations sort of spun off into or connected with this. I wouldn't say that they created this, but they definitely spun off into this. Sorry. And then the other thing I would say is that like as far as the visual inspiration, it really was almost mindless in a sense, where it's like we were really just trying to get things down. There was a little bit of inspiration that was purely visual, purely aesthetic, in a way that I don't normally work. My practice is usually around a lot of meaning, what the client kind of like really needs and value. And this was way more purely aesthetic. And when you operate in that space, you're kind of free to try new things and do whatever you want. And I think both of us kind of needed that kind of push. And this project kind of allowed that, at least for me. But Patrick, I want to hear what you have to say about it too.
Yeah, there was something that you said, Salimi, that really resonated with me about just looking at the work and like the feeling that you get from the art. And like, I think something that was really central to our thinking as we were developing the process is that like we wanted the art to be good. Like we wanted it to be interesting to look at, like regardless of, you know, I think there are a lot of people in the space who look at NFTs as investment vehicles or speculative assets, or like it's almost more about the form than the content in some ways. And so we kind of wanted to turn that on its head and make something that if you just encountered it, like, you know, like a flyer on the street or something, you'd want to stop and be like, what is that? And so like sharing the work without even any of the Web3 parts attached, just like sharing the process, the various sketches, like, you know, as we were making stuff, I was just sending it to friends who, you know, had no connection or interest in crypto anything, but were just like, hey, that looks cool. That's kind of a cool shape. Like, what is that? And I haven't seen that before. And like centering that kind of like, it's like almost like childlike in a way, like making the process really about like the things that we like about art and not so much about like markets, you know? And like the creative self-support, I mean, is definitely like a through line in all of the work and all of our conversations, because like we're living in capitalism and it requires money to survive, and like we have to sell our time and labor. But it also, there was this element of this project that felt kind of like a sandbox. Like we were just like, we can totally treat our relationship to this project and the work and like each other, like we can kind of come up with it based on just like what feels good. So it's never really started feeling like, oh, I have a job, or like, oh, one of us is like the boss, or like, oh, I have, you know, we've set deadlines and we've set targets and stuff, but it's all come out of this like, I think just like fascination with the process and like actually liking the work. And like, you know, kind of another way that that is tying back into this like closing the loop and like having a community around it is that one of the major like aha moments for me was when we put up the Figma community file, and there was some explanation. I mean, the entire project is kind of like runs off of vibes in a way. Like people see it, they like get whatever they get from it, but there's not a, we don't have a ton of written copy about like, this is what you're looking at and this is what it means. So, and I think that opens up things more to the viewer to take more of an active role. And like where that really clicked for me was seeing people like downloading the Figma file and making stuff, like basically with no instructions or very loose instructions. And I think it like, to me, that's an ongoing success of the project, that it kind of connects to something maybe universal, or that like play, like tangrams, or like, you know, I feel like there are a lot of like creative, like early childhood design systems or games, like that kind of thing. And then as you grow up and like age out of those and do like serious real work, you know, that kind of like gets left by the wayside. But just seeing like people that neither of us have ever met taking these weird little blobs that we made and being like, oh, I know what this is. I can like make a picture of a dog with this, or I can like draw my own mandala with this. And you had asked about kind of the, I guess like design influences. We did a lot of, I guess you could call it mood boards. We had a lot of like visual references going into it. All across the board, you know, like graphic design stuff. There were some ideas that we were talking about as far as like, if you were to receive a communication from like an alien, what would that look like? Or what if someone, I mean, I think you can like, you know, taking out the like supernatural part of it, like if you go out into the woods or like go out into nature, like there's something that's being communicated by all of that life that's not like necessarily written out in letters. So like that was kind of one of the ideas that we were working with, like how can you convey things that are maybe intangible and maybe ambiguous, but like, you know, you look at these things and it's like, oh, this is kind of a language. And in the process of creating them and like doing a lot of iterations, um, you know, they started to sort of push us in directions. So like another big kind of turning point moment in the creative process was like, you know, we'd start with one image and be like, all right, I want to create 10 different versions of this. And I want them to look different enough, you know, like I want them to look like different variations on a theme and not just like I took this same thing and I flipped it vertically or something. And what I realized after doing a bunch of those is that we were basically making like cells of animation, which was not our plan at all at the beginning to do like, we talked about like, oh, maybe there could be some video element, there could be some sound element. But there was one day where I just took like, 10 of these different sketches that we'd done and like threw them in an animated GIF maker and was like, oh, that's cool. This is kind of what the project is trying to become, is it's like these still images are more like slices of a thing that's in motion and constantly moving. And so kind of flipping that and looking at it through that lens actually made making the individual pieces come a lot more naturally, because it was kind of like, oh, if I've done this one and this one, like they're sort of leading me towards doing this one, and then now this shape is moving around and can keep moving around. So it was this very like feedback loop process of like what we were into aesthetically, but then also as we were creating, like 420 pieces turns out is a lot of pieces of art to make by hand. So like
Maybe
part
too
of the
many, actually.
arguably too many. So like part of the process is like how do we keep that process fun? Because it's like we really, for me at least, I'm like, I want this to be enjoyable. Like this shouldn't feel like a job. This is something that we're kind of choosing. We're making all the choices from the ground up. So it's like up to us what parts of sort of like this old, 9 to 5, like you have a boss and you have to make so many widgets a day. Like how much of that worldview are we bringing in consciously or unconsciously into this new thing that we're trying to make?
Wow, 400 pieces. Like I'm like just thinking about that, because you always have to also have an iteration, and after a while you might be like, how do I iterate? Like, how do I go on with the next? You finish like 200 and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm running out of ideas. But I guess that's where collaboration comes in. And I think that's like you said, it's really interesting to kind of witness, like in the pandemic, it was kind of like a still stand for creativity. It felt like, at least for me, I felt like very restrictive creatively, and now it's just like this bubble has shifted into this digital space, and it's like a whole new ecosystem that is evolving. And like you said, it's kind of like nature, just there's different ways it finds its way, I guess. That's really, yeah. I'm still like 400 pieces, and I need to try this actually myself.
We got about halfway through. I think it was around like 150 or 200 where it like dawned on me like what we were trying to do. And luckily, this project has been in the works for like over 5 months. I think from when we first met was like September maybe of last year, and then iterator.fund went live on February 22nd. So like we definitely had enough time that it wasn't like we had to do this super sprint to get everything done. But even so, even like budgeting, what we thought was a lot of time, at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, you've got to actually make the donuts. And kind of working with that being like the one constraint, like we sort of decided, this is going to be the mint date, and kind of built our timeline backwards around that. And then, had the spreadsheet where it was like, all right, we got this many done, we got this many to go, we've got to do like 50 a week or something. And definitely, I mean, yeah, I think the last like week or so that we were like on deadline was just like, there were some epic moments of like,
it was a little rough, because you even realized that like naming and metadata and all these things you didn't think about when you were creating the art are also just as important. And so working with our developer, who's a good friend, kind of made us realize that this is incredibly hard, and that's part of why we want to open source this too and have that whole process there. Because I mean, for us, like, I consider myself pretty aware of like Web3 as a whole ecosystem, but I didn't know exactly how to do this, how to like make. I've minted art on Zora, I've minted art on Foundation and OpenSea directly, but I haven't made a custom contract. I haven't ever done anything of this scale. And so like, we want to make it so that this also not only is a visual like open source, but the process of kind of getting it out there is also available and transparent. And I think that that's something that like, yeah, like it was very hard for us. We want it to be less hard for other people to go, oh, I want to make 200 NFTs or 100 NFTs or whatever, and release them. We want that to be very open and available. But yeah, that last bit was very tough.
So it sounds like you've implemented like this Creative Commons license, right, to the project, because it sounds like that's kind of what you're describing. And I'm wondering how you see these elements like change the way we interact with NFTs. I think you're touching on it a bit, but I wanted us to like maybe focus on that more, and what could license like provide in the future in that context?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think we're just seeing the beginnings of that with DAOs that are centered around NFTs. I think the sort of like leader and the best example is Nouns DAO, where they've sort of taken an open approach and said that you can make derivatives of their work, you can sell it directly, you can go into their snapshot and their governance, and you can propose ideas and get those funded completely without talking to any person. And for us, the way we maybe envision that, and this is getting a little ahead, and we're not quite sure yet, but the resale of these will go into a treasury, and hopefully that treasury becomes sort of what NounsDAO has, which is like the ability for the community to upvote and create proposals and ideas for their derivatives, or just say they want to make a film about it, or they want to use them and get a tattoo of it, or they want to project it, or make music visualizers. Like we sort of have a very wide net for that, but I think tactically it's like, yeah, it's about the resales, and it's about sort of like getting the rest of them minted is the kind of the main focus, so that we can like have capital to focus like 100% or 80% on this, because both of us also work jobs and have lives outside of this thing. So yeah, but Patrick, do you have anything to add to that?
I almost forgot about that you guys have your other lives, you know, aside Web3, because it sounds like there's just so much, and you're so like engaged and engrossed in the work. But it's nice that you brought that up, because I think it's nice for our community to also hear that, you know, no matter how much you're caught up in Web3 and you're helping build and shape Web3, you know, outside the real life, IRL life is also, I guess, you know, it's there. And so it's nice to hear that from you, that we're all balancing it, you know, it's mental health in that sense. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's also been one really cool aspect that I've seen is that there's been a lot of kind of remixing. So like the create your own meme kind of contest that we're doing. It's been cool to see other artists who already have kind of their own voice and their own style, like take the elements in the kit that we provided and make like, you know, their version of what Iterator could be, kind of like with their own voice. And I mean, recently, like in the last couple of weeks, I feel like I've seen, like Chris, you've sent me some stuff. It seems like there's this new push or this new energy for like interoperability, but like aesthetically, so that like everyone is kind of, to me, it's like sort of breaking down the boundaries or like the segregations between like someone being purely a creator and someone being purely part of the audience. Like, what if, you know, we treated fan art with the same like value as like the original thing, right? Or like, I feel like, you know, when you're kids, like if you draw as a kid, like what do you draw? You know, it's like cartoons you see on TV. You're kind of like remixing other people's content that really resonates with you. And so I see a lot of that happening like in general, but like with our project and other projects like Bloomers, for example, like we're all kind of like all creators and all fans of each other. And the nice thing about the CCO is that it's everyone's just like, hey, these pieces are out there. Like we're all bringing our toys, you know, do what you want. We're not going to be precious about like, oh, you used my special teardrop shape that I patented, so like you have to pay me royalties on my shape. And that's kind of like, you know, touching on sort of like the culture of the project and like how to balance it with you know, the rest of life outside of Web3. It's like that's hugely important for me because, you know, just like figuring out how to make a living as a self-employed creative person is a lot of work and like often very stressful work. So like it's been really important that this project be kind of like where I go to recharge in a way, and not to have those like really heavy like, oh, this has to sell out, or like, you know, with releasing music, like, oh, this has to get this many plays or whatever. And like that to me is like a very kind of like old paradigm mindset that I still feel like very stuck in, that it's really like your success is like measured by these like exterior metrics and these numbers. You know, like if I put out some music and it doesn't get 1 million plays on Spotify, does that mean it was bad or that I shouldn't have done it? You know? And like, so that's kind of one cool thing I see happening in this ecosystem, is that there's this like leveling of the playing field, and like projects that are really embracing like CCO are kind of like, yeah, let's just all bring what we have to the table. And like particularly going back to what you were saying, Chris, about sort of like trying to work in public and make more of the process visible, so that, you know, because all this is very new. I mean, like it's literally been 1 year since I even started like thinking about working in this medium, and like everything is still kind of up for grabs in a way. Like a lot of projects I see kind of like jumping onto the success of other things. Like if one thing happens, like for example, like a lot of NFT collections are profile pictures because that's like proven to be successful. But then it's like, well, what if we want to make something that's outside of that? Like, so I think just keeping like a spirit of play about it, and like, you know, working in public, letting people see like, this is how we did it. You can literally like, we're cleaning up the Figma file to where, you know, we're going to post it and people can go in and be like, here's actually how, this is the raw material. This is like how all of the stuff was made, and you can take it, you can do your own spin on it, whatever, in the hopes that like someone who's maybe just learning about Web3 or NFTs now, or even just like curious about digital art in general, like can have a resource, you know? Because I think a lot of what I've encountered in like creative work in general, like trying to do that my whole life, is that it's sort of hard to find like good advice and like transparency about stuff. And like, you know, there's a lot of people who will sell you that access, or like, here's my ebook on how to get 1 million plays, or like, you know, how to make your NFT project pop. But, you know, we're coming from a background of like doing art collectives and just kind of like creative people coming together for the community of it and just to have fun with it. So it's like any kind of success or failure that we're experiencing in our process, we want that to be something that other people can learn from.
I like what you said about, you know, that through open sourcing and through being transparent, you help other creators. And like, I think this is everyone in the world right now, I feel like, is creating things and is creative. And how can we make it more efficient? How can we bring more people together who are on the same playing field, or who, like you said, they're working like on the similar projects? I think that's Yeah, it's a struggle. Like that's what we at NewCoin also focus on. How can we have people live a better life through making more creative choices to express themselves, but also get their monetization, and also maybe find other people who want to do the same things. And I guess it's not an easy question to think about art and monetization in the way of like, we come from this world where art is really pure, and like you said, you want to do it for the fun of it, but as soon as you do something and you get monetized for it, there is a pressure level to it at some points if you do it at a certain degree. And side projects, like you said, is really important to balance out for your personal growth and for your, I guess, growth as a spiritual being, or like for expression, for creativity. So it's something that I think has also been on my mind, like how do we find this balance between our real life and functioning and like also having fun and just enjoying life and expressing and being creative. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, how can decentralization and projects like yours, how can they help creators distribute their work and find opportunities, find learning opportunities, and also like how can projects like Iterator help creators monetize or create more? So what do you see, like what is decentralization offering?
Yeah, so I think immediately before even a DAO gets created, it's a little bit of what we hinted at, which is like there being open sourcing everything, like giving people the roadmap to do an NFT project, the roadmap to just make digital art, and here are the protocols and the processes you use to like arrive at what we've done. Not saying that it's perfect or the best, but it is an endpoint with yeah. And then I would say the more long-term way that they can sort of like decentralization can sort of be pushed is what I was talking about with sort of these visual arts DAOs that use Creative Commons Zero Open License, because all of the work then becomes co-owned by everyone. So it's like you then have this sort of repository that's growing of more and more work that you can sort of tap into and pull from. And I think that only makes things better for people. I don't think that it has like a negative effect. I think you see a lot of copying, but I think you learn about like what derivatives are, and you learn a lot about what sort of like trying to change the model that exists now, because I think that a lot of like creative licenses are extractive, and kind of making those expansive instead.
Yeah, I think there's another really direct and tangible benefit for artists, which is that I think in general, I mean, this might just be kind of like our little bubble of the world, but like a lot of the creative people that I know are very into community, mutual aid, wealth redistribution. Like, I think that the creative class in general is very used to having to do a lot with a little. And a lot of, the practice of like trying to make it support yourself as a creative person, I think is like right now the system has so much like inefficiencies built into it, or it's like to do the actual work you have to spend so much time doing all of these things around the work to like make it legible and make it marketable and like findable. And so any way that can be like a shorter distance between like an artist and another artist, or an artist and a collector, fan, collaborator, that like frees up more energy in the whole system. So it's like as people start to connect with the work that we're doing and mint stuff, that like frees us up to support projects that we're already connected to, and then like that frees up those people to like contribute to what's valuable to them. So like one example, Woods Edge Builders Collective is another project that's like friends of ours, and they're based here in Durham, North Carolina, where I live, and both of us are from. And like they're doing like incredibly tangible work, but using Web3 tools to crowdfund it. So like they're doing all this natural building, like, you know, like our buddy Ross is literally building his own house out of like trees that he cut down and like mud. And like, so I think there's a lot of potential. What's really like inspiring to me, and I think, you know, I would love to see more development in this space, is like the ways to connect what can be like a very abstract and kind of like divorced from reality world of Web3 to like very tangible IRL issues like housing and like artist support. So that's kind of like, at least like ideologically, kind of part of where we're coming at it from, is that like if you just give creators resources, like everyone benefits, because the systems are already there, the relationships are already there. But, you know, speaking very generally, like pretty much all the creative people that I know personally are like very under-resourced and having to, you know, bartend and work the office job 9 to 5 and whatever else to like afford the time to actually do the like making the cool stuff and building the communities. So it's like anywhere that we can kind of take out that, the like, again, like the middleman or the platform that's like taking some percentage of the work and the value that you're putting in, that just sort of like frees up the whole community to thrive more.
I'm just like wondering, how can NFTs, like can NFTs solve this? Like how can it do that? You know, how can it bridge these this gap that, you know, some of these problems that we're talking on, maybe even social tokens, like any ideas, like what's the biggest utility, you know, for, I'd say, NFTs and maybe social tokens, if you have any ideas on that. And then maybe you can also maybe share like a few words, you know, you want to leave with our community who might be maybe interested in your project, or just like interested in getting on board like on Web3. And yeah, any last thoughts would be nice, but maybe we can start with like the utility for NFTs and perhaps maybe social tokens.
Yeah, I'll lead off. That's a like an amazing question. I think it's like the one that's on so many people's minds. I see NFTs as a financial, not necessarily financial, as a primitive in general. And I think that that primitive, I've seen the potential for direct value transfer with art, with music, with work. I'm not sure if NFTs are going to be the solution to a lot of problems that the world has, but I think they're at least getting us thinking in new mindsets that maybe we weren't considering before. And I personally have benefited as someone who does commercial work and as an artist, just having this other avenue that's like, oh, I can go on Zora and mint my project whenever I want. I could do one today. And like, that's, someone might buy it. That's just incredible to me that in the past, it's like that would require so many other steps. I mean, we've done gallery shows where that's been the case. It's like selling art is not this like fluid thing. And so, and then kind of parting kind of thoughts for me, I would say just definitely go to iterators.fun. And we have links to all the community things, the community file on Figma, links to the Discord there. Also, we're on Twitter, twitter.com/iterator, I think, without an S, I believe. And then I'm on Twitter as my name, Chris Martz, Martz. And I'm just really thankful that you guys brought us on. This is our first time talking about the project in a public manner. And yeah, thank you for being very receptive, asking just like really great questions and being patient. And I sent you a lot of information last minute, and thank you for just like being, just really wonderful to talk to. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to echo everything that you said, Chris, and like kind of my 2 cents on how does the blockchain solve the problems of the world. I'm definitely not like a crypto maximalist. I think it's really about intentions and values more than the tools necessarily. In a lot of ways, I see like the conversation around what we've kind of all just decided to call Web3 as shorthand, as kind of very similar to like the year 2000. Like I can imagine like time traveling back to like 2001, and like people would be having the same conversation, but it's about MP3s, and like MP3s are going to change the world and whatever. And you know, now you see like 20 years later, like, yeah, well, they did, but it wasn't all necessarily like utopian. It didn't necessarily help everyone. So I feel like the technology itself and the tools are like very attention grabbing, because they're like very new and shiny and like potentially revolutionary and transformative, but the actual like the issues are very old, and like the work itself is very timeless, and like the questions are, you know, questions that we've been trying to figure out for a long time. So I would say that like the potential of these tools kind of depends on like the people using them and their intentions. And yeah, like parting thoughts, go to iterator.fun, mint an iterator or 10. And I'm on social media as well. All of my social media accounts are under my electronic music artist name, which is Tree City with 3 E's. So I'm on Twitter, I'm at Tree City Beats, and on Instagram, I'm just at Tree City. And yeah, like thank you guys so much for taking the time to talk to us. Like Chris said, this is kind of the first time that we've really spoken out loud, like this level of thought about the project and the process and everything. So like thank y'all for hosting and creating the space for us to do that.
Yeah, we feel honored. It was fabulous and amazing, and we're glad that, you know, it could happen. And we definitely love what you guys are working on, and I'm sure our community will be already saving your Twitter names and, you know, following you to learn more about the project. And yeah, we just thank you for taking your time, and this was really a great conversation, and yeah, we enjoyed it. So thank you all so much for being a part of NewForum. Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Patrick. It was a fabulous episode. And if you want to get more involved in our community as well, make sure to follow us on our social platforms. We will put all the links in the description below, including Chris and Patrick's information as well. And we also have a private Telegram group. We'll have the link in the description. Thank you. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you guys for taking the time. Yeah, it was my pleasure.
Thank you so much.